The promise of the stars. The stars looked close enough to touch. From the command deck of the Dauntless, Captain Hale stood before the panoramic viewport as the first human terraforming fleet slid into orbit around the barren world below. The planet's surface was a tapestry of rust-colored deserts and cracked stone, without a single cloud in its pale sky. To the untrained eye, it was nothing but another dead rock circling an unremarkable sun. To Hale, and to the millions of people watching the live feed across Earth and her colonies, it was the first step toward humanity's destiny. "All systems nominal," reported Navigation Officer Quan, his voice a mix of discipline and awe. "Orbital insertion complete. Terraformer arrays on the Genesis and Morning Light report ready status." From the viewport's edge, the massive shadow of the Genesis drifted into view. A leviathan of human engineering, bristling with kilometer-long atmospheric processors and surface impact pods. It was not a warship, but its scale rivaled anything the military had ever fielded. Following in its wake, the Morning Light carried millions of tons of engineered microbes, genetically altered plant seeds, and self-assembling habitat cores. "This is history," Hale said softly, almost to himself. In cities from Earth to Mars, streets were filled with crowds watching the broadcast on holoscreens. Children in schools pointed at the image of the dead world, whispering about what it would look like once the oceans came, once green spread across the dust. For the first time in centuries, humanity felt united in purpose. It was that unity that had given them the courage to approach the Galactic Coalition. The Hall of Concordance was the Coalition's heart, a cathedral of alien architecture suspended within the orbit of a binary star. Walls of semi-transparent crystal pulsed faintly, as if alive, with veins of golden light threading through their surfaces. Delegates from over 400 member civilizations moved through its vast chambers, each accompanied by hovering translator drones. Ambassador Lucien Ward stood at the human delegation's podium, flanked by aides and envoys. The coalition crest shimmered in the air above the central dais, a ring of linked emblems, one for each member race. For now, humanity's emblem was missing. "Ambassador Ward," the presiding speaker began, its voice a resonant chord of 3 tones that the translators softened into speech. "We have reviewed your petition for provisional membership. The committee acknowledges your species' remarkable progress. However," Ward tensed. He could hear the unspoken "but" hanging like a blade. "We find that your civilization does not yet meet the behavioral stability thresholds required for admission. Your recent history is marked by internal warfare, resource conflicts, and territorial aggression. While we respect your ambitions, you are not ready to take part in galactic governance." A murmur rippled through the assembly. Ward glanced at his aides, pale faces, downcast eyes. He knew that arguing here, in front of the coalition, would only feed the perception of humans as impulsive and volatile. The speaker continued, almost with sympathy. "We encourage you to continue your development, to build stability within your own systems, and to learn the values of cooperation that we hold dear. In time, perhaps, we will revisit your application." Ward forced a measured nod. "We thank the committee for its consideration," he said through clenched teeth. The formalities ended, and the human delegation filed out of the chamber. Behind them, alien eyes followed, some curious, some mocking, and some, disturbingly, calculating. Back aboard the Dauntless, Captain Hale received the verdict in a short, encrypted transmission. The bridge crew read it in silence. No one spoke for several seconds. "So," Quan said finally, "we build our worlds without them." Hale's gaze lingered on the rust-colored planet below. "We always did," he said. "The only difference now is we know where we stand." Above the dead world, the Genesis fired its first atmosphere-seeding arrays. Great arcs of silver dust spilled downward, streaking through the thin air like comet tails. The process had begun. Humanity had been told it was not ready for the stars. The stars, Hale thought, had better be ready for humanity. The first fire. The colony of New Horizon had been alive for only 9 years. 9 years since the Horizon Dawn landed on a world no one had thought worth claiming. A cold, dry sphere on the fringe of human-settled space, 3 weeks by FTL from Earth's nearest patrol base. Terraformers had worked miracles here. Grass swayed under a turquoise sky, the air smelled faintly of rain, and fields of protein grain rolled in gentle waves toward the distant silhouette of snow-capped mountains. At the colony's heart, children were laughing in the open plaza, their voices echoing off glass and steel towers built from prefabricated habitat modules. People worked, argued, fell in love, and forgot that this had once been lifeless stone. When the attack came, it began without warning. It started as a tremor in the ground, too steady to be natural. Miners in the North Ridge reported strange vibrations in their equipment, as though the soil itself was humming. Within minutes, sensor grids lit up with incoming objects, hundreds of them, descending from high orbit. By the time the colony governor issued an emergency alert, the sky was already darkening. From orbit, they came, dagger-shaped ships of obsidian metal, their hulls etched with alien glyphs that seemed to shimmer and crawl like living ink. Their drives burned with an ugly green-white glow, trailing heat flares that distorted the clouds beneath them. No broadcast, no demand for surrender. The first strike hit the Western District. A column of fire and pulverized earth erupted where the agricultural domes had stood, the shockwave shattering windows kilometers away. Seconds later, plasma lances ripped through the defense towers, severing them at their bases before they could fire a single shot. In the control center, Governor Anaya leaned over the tactical table, her hands trembling. "Any ID on the ships?" she demanded. "Negative," replied Security Chief Rourke, sweat streaming down his temples. "No coalition registry, no transponders, they're just hitting us. No comms." "Get me Earth," the comms officer's voice cracked, signals being jammed. Outside, people were running in every direction. Families clutching children scrambled toward the shelters carved into the bedrock, but the attackers seemed to know exactly where those were. A gunship skimmed low over the rooftops, spearing the entrance to Shelter 3 with a precision strike that turned the blast doors into molten slag. Anaya's last transmission, a short-range burst aimed at any passing vessel, was picked up 3 systems away. It lasted only 6 seconds. Under attack, no warning, thousands dead, burning. The signal cut off mid-scream. 3 weeks later, the UNS Resolute arrived to investigate. Captain Edric Hale stood on the bridge as the ship descended into low orbit. Below him, the colony was gone, not ruined. Gone. The city blocks were nothing but overlapping craters. The mountains were scorched black, the rivers boiled dry, even the grasslands had been stripped to sterile dirt, as if someone had scoured the land clean of life. "God help them," whispered Quan. There were no bodies, no survivors, not even wreckage from the enemy ships. Whoever had done this had erased their own presence as thoroughly as they had erased the colony. The Coalition's official statement arrived 2 days later. Hale read it in silence, jaw tightening with every word. The destruction of the human settlement designated New Horizon is regrettable. However, the Coalition cannot intervene in the affairs of non-member species without full authorization from the High Assembly. Such authorization is not granted at this time. We urge the United Earth government to exercise caution in future colonial expansion. When Hale read it aloud to his officers, the room stayed quiet for a long time. Then one of the junior lieutenants muttered, "So that's it, we're on our own." Hale didn't answer. He just kept staring at the dead world below, his reflection superimposed over its burnt surface. This was the first fire. It would not be the last. The long silence. The second colony fell before the first funerals on Earth had finished. On the morning the memorial bells sounded for New Horizon, 5,000 light-years away, the grain silos of Locust 3 went dark in a neat line, as if someone had pinched the power from the world with 2 fingers. The agricultural satellites blinked to black, then flared, tiny knives of light, before the fragments rained down in incandescent sheets. A child in a yellow raincoat, standing in a courtyard to watch the meteor shower, asked his mother why the stars were crying. The recording ended in static. Requests for coalition intervention multiplied. So did the replies. Beautiful, hollow messages that said everything and promised nothing. "We grieve with you. We are monitoring the situation. We must respect jurisdictional boundaries." The syntax changed, never the meaning. By the end of the month, 7 settlements had been erased. It was never the same method twice. On Ria's arc, the attackers poisoned the upper atmosphere with an engineered aerosol that shattered oxygen bonds. People suffocated under blue skies. On Port Jericho, they drove iron rods at relativistic speeds through the mantle, popping volcanoes like blisters until the ash columns snuffed the towns. On Harrow, they shut off the biosphere dome's thermostats and let hard vacuum finger its way through hairline cracks. A colony freeze-dried in 90 minutes. Each time, Earth called for help. Each time, the galaxy looked away. In the United Earth Assembly Chamber, the ceiling showed a serene projection of Earth from orbit, continents veiled by weather, night cities embroidered in gold, while the room below devolved into shouting. "We cannot keep bleeding into the dark," said Director Shirin Vor. "Bring the settlers home, consolidate defenses, end expansion until we know who is killing us." A senator from the Pacific Bloc slammed a palm on the console. "We abandon the rim and the predators win. Retreat invites more raids. We need escorts, not eulogies." Admiral Rakesh Dutta, grim-faced, spoke without raising his voice. "Escorts we do not have enough of. The fleet was built to police trade lanes and show the flag, not to fight ghosts that never broadcast, never ransom, never parley." He touched the table and a list sprang up in cold white letters. Hull numbers of lost patrol craft, dates, coordinates, the last words received. The display seemed to dim the room. He didn't say the other part aloud. The fleet wasn't just outgunned, it was outthought. Every ambush had been designed after studying human response timelines. The way they scrambled QRFs, the routes evac ships took, the few seconds a colony grid needed to hand off between generators. Whoever hunted them had read the manual. "Then we forced them to read a different manual," said Vor. "Change the script." "How?" asked the senator. "With what?" Silence fell, thick and hot, as the assembly waited for an answer that didn't exist yet. Captain Hale's ship, UNS Resolute, was assigned to follow-up duty, a euphemism for visiting graves too large to mark. They came out of drive in the Selene 5 system to the sight of slow-moving arcs of debris, each piece tumbling with the lazy indecency of things left unburied. The colony's orbital farm wheels had been cut on precise planes. The severed sections still contained neat rows of soil, tomato vines twisting in vacuums like green ropes. Hale watched a scarlet tomato, perfect absurd, bump off the Resolute's forward shield and disintegrate into frost. "Picking up a life pod," Officer Kwan said. "One beeper, no ID, very low power." They brought it aboard. Inside was an older miner with frost in his eyebrows and a thermal blanket wound around his shoulders like a silver chrysalis. He stared at the decontamination lights as if he could still see Selene's twin moons reflected there. "Came quiet," he said, voice like gravel. "No hail, no flags, they cut the farms to make us look, then they cut the town, gentle-like they'd done it before. I didn't hear them laugh." He stopped, shuddered. "But I could feel it." "Who?" Hale asked. The miner's eyes slid sideways, away from the captain and into some middle distance. "Does it matter, son? If you're drowning in open water, the shape of the wave don't matter." In the ready room later, Hale ran the last 6 transmissions from Selene 5 on repeat. The clipped orders to seal the domes, the calm of a doctor counting remaining vials of analgesic, somebody singing under their breath. He imagined the Coalition's hall of crystal and light, the triple-toned voices of its dignitaries, and felt something old and feral stir in his ribs. By autumn, the tone of Earth's pleas changed. The briefing stopped asking when the Coalition would send help and started asking whether. A junior diplomat, exhausted, sent an unsanctioned message to the Coalition liaison. "Every time you say not authorized, someone's last breath is spent in the dark. How many authorizations is a child worth?" The reply arrived in a packet of legalese. It mentioned precedent, governance thresholds, and non-aligned conflicts. It did not mention children. News feeds filled with faces, teachers from dust domes, mechanics from orbital yards, a violinist in a blue dress who played the same piece every evening in the colony square of Windfall Station until the night the square blinked out of existence. Hashtags, mourning ribbons, solidarity streams, the rituals of a connected species trying to hold itself together. The rituals didn't stop the next strike. The enemy grew bolder. They began to take the evac routes. It was an art form to them. Allow 2 convoys through to build pattern confidence, then slaughter the third at the midpoint between response bubbles. The attackers never chased stragglers. They didn't have to. The survivors carried terror home more efficiently than any broadcast. Hale's ship escorted one of those convoys, 6 transports leaking heat and fear, 3 tugs pulling habitat cores, a handful of miners welded together into a makeshift corvette bristling with stolen gun barrels. The ambush came at 200 ship time. First a microburst, harmless, a feint, then a precise lattice of mines igniting in sequence, the pattern tuned to the Resolute's known evasive profile. "Enemy hulls?" Hale asked, although enemy hulls rarely showed themselves. "Nothing on the board," Quan said, "just the fields." Hale had drilled for this. The fleet had started drilling for this after New Horizon. Reverse thrust, roll them over the transports, open the zoo. The zoo was a cloud of decoy drones and flare-bearing drones, and drones that pretended to be 10 times their size when lit by active sensors. They tumbled out like a shed skin, 100 false Resolutes bright as fireworks. The minefield tried to think, tried to predict, tried to decide, and in the half-second stutter of its machine mind, the convoy slid through the gap. The tug's pilots cheered on an open channel. Hale didn't. He counted minutes until they were into the next safe corridor, then counted hours until the transports decoupled in Earth's shadow and he could finally close his eyes on a bridge that stank of hot plastic and adrenaline. On the docks, the evacuees came off in waves, holding bags that held other bags, pushing carts with the stubborn insistence of people who had already lost too much to set anything else down. A little girl in a foil blanket asked Hale if the stars were always that loud. He lied to her kindly. There were theories. Intelligence printed them on neat sheets with crisp headers. Some said the Varrock Combine, an expansionist power with a taste for proxy wars, was using deniable assets. Others blamed privateers licensed by smaller coalition members who wanted human worlds cleared without the paperwork of war. A few whispered that the coalition itself had a quiet hand in it, pruning a species it deemed unready by outsourcing the violence to plausible monsters. No proof, no signatures, no wreckage. In council bars that humans rarely entered twice, traders joked through their gills about the soft steppers, a nickname for human diplomats who used please and thank you while their worlds burned. It was said with a smile that had too many teeth. The United Earth Fleet began changing in small, desperate ways. Refuel nodes were moved off the charts and buried inside hollowed asteroids. Patrol patterns went from predictable ribbons to jagged scribbles. Communications shifted to tight beam bursts relayed through cold mirrors. Passive reflectors dropped in deep space that didn't broadcast, only winked light along like secret handshakes. Shipyards ran nights without clocks. Civilian tugs arrived under false bills of lading and departed with armor plates bolted to their ribs. Engineers took apart survey probes and rebuilt them as listening posts with patient ears. They took apart cargo loaders and rebuilt them as guns that could track and fire without human hands. Old admirals who had retired on Luna farms came back to war rooms that smelled of dust and coffee. Young officers swapped out doctrinal textbooks for loose-leaf manuals with handwritten margins. When they do X, assume they want Y, not Z. Delay pride, prioritize lives. Expect the third move, not the second. On Mars, a machinist named Reese Alvarez printed a bracket to reinforce a mass driver's recoil mount. It was a small fix, inelegant. It reduced failure rates by 16%. 16% meant one more convoy through a mine curtain, meant one more violinist playing in one more square for one more week. The machinist slept at the shop for 3 days and told no one. The coalition sent a delegation. They arrived in ships whose hulls were poems of light. The press loved them. The press loved anyone who looked like hope. They toured a refugee camp in a Jovian moon's shadow, stood very still as cameras captured them bowing their head crests, and announced the formation of a fact-finding committee. They promised to urgently study necessary amendments that might allow rapid assistance in situations of non-member distress. After the press conference, one of the delegates met with the Earth Assembly's leadership in a small, quiet room. "You must understand," the delegate said, 3 voices braided into one smooth ribbon, "the coalition is a symphony of balance. If we bend for you, we must bend for others. Then we are no longer a symphony, we are noise." Director Vor folded her hands. "Noise is what mothers hear when air runs out." We will accelerate the committee, the delegate said, with the mild offense of someone who felt their metaphor mishandled. When? Procedures are clear. When? Vor repeated. The delegate did not say a date. The long silence acquired a timestamp anyway. Hale took the Resolute out beyond the mapped lanes, farther each mission, to the places where star fields thickened like spilled salt. He listened. Sometimes he thought he could hear the enemy's breath, the subtle Doppler of a drive signature just at the edge of detectability, the careful placement of a decoy to herd a convoy toward a choke point it wouldn't survive. He learned to love empty space. Empty space meant his people might live to watch another sunrise from a real sky. On the 30th day of the 13th mission, he stood alone at the viewport and decided he would no longer send situation reports that asked for help. He would send situation reports that stated facts, proposed actions, and attached requisitions for the means to act. If no help was coming, then the words had to change shape. He drafted the first of those new reports that night. It began. Recommend cessation of further rimward expansion effective immediately. Recommend phased withdrawal of all non-critical colonial assets to core. Recommend construction of hardened defense layers at 20, 35, and 50 AU with overlapping fields of fire. Recommend fielding of stealth reconnaissance craft to identify hostile staging areas. Recommend we stop asking who will save us. He hovered over the last sentence a long time before he sent it. He didn't know if he was permitted to recommend philosophy. He sent it anyway. The order came 3 weeks later, signed by the Assembly and stamped by the fleet. Consolidate. It was one word long in the public feed. Inside the encrypted channel to ships and governors, it was paragraphs of coordinates, timetables, and contingency trees that split into thinner and thinner branches until the choices were hair-fine. You could get lost in those branches and never find daylight. You could also walk them like tightrope and bring your people home. Across the rim, colonial governors read the order with tears on their tongues. Some cried from relief, some cried from rage. A few sent back short messages that read like prayers or curses. It was hard to tell which. The convoys formed. The lights went out on the far maps. The long silence stopped being a condition and became a plan. Earth dimmed its windows. The shipyards burned white. Humanity turned toward its core and began to build a wall no one could see yet. And somewhere in the dark between the stars, the hunters paused, just for a breath, at the sensation of a change in the water. The prey was turning, the retreat. The order came through fleet channels at 300 Sol standard, consolidate. No rhetoric, no ceremony, just the single-word directive that would redraw humanity's place in the galaxy. Across the rim, in cold mining towns and frontier farms, in hydroponic towers and algae refineries, it was the sound of finality. Every colonial governor knew what it meant. Pack up, shut down, and bring your people home, or leave them to die when the hunters came. The convoys form in the Perseus Arm, at the farthest edge of human settlement. The UNS Valiant took point on a retreat column. 17 transports, 12 freighters, and one aging hospital ship lumbered in a tight wedge formation, their drives flickering with strain. Behind them, station crews dismantled what they could, power cores, AI servers, weapon batteries, and detonated the rest. The explosions lit up the black like silent fireworks. Watching from the bridge, Captain Merrick felt the guilt settle in his gut. "We're burning history," he murmured. "Better we burn it than they use it against us," replied his XO. Her tone was practical, but her eyes didn't leave the destruction until the last flare guttered out. The hunters arrive. The retreat was never clean. Convoy Bravo 6 was halfway to its next jump point when the enemy came. Fast, sharp vectors knifing through the dark. Sensors caught them as brief drive signatures, too quick to lock. Moments later, mines unfolded in the convoy's path, each one the size of a man's torso, but with enough charge to peel a freighter open like a fruit. Hard burn. All ships, follow the Valiant. Deploy countermeasures. Drone swarms spilled from the convoy's flanks, scattering flares and chaff in brilliant blooms. The Valiant's point defense turrets spoke in quick, angry bursts, picking off the closest threats. Still, a cargo hauler took a hit amidships. Air and frozen debris vented in a single luminous cloud. Merrick didn't slow. He couldn't. The hauler's captain had already sealed bulkheads and was screaming for the others to keep going. Scorched systems, not every outpost could be evacuated. Some were too far, others lacked enough working transports. For them, the retreat meant self-destruction. On Ymir Station, the last 10 technicians moved through silent halls with demolition charges strapped to their backs. They worked without speaking, each knowing the timer was already ticking. They finished in the command hub, one of them placing a hand on the glass before stepping into the dropship that would take them to the convoy. Behind them, Ymir's fusion core went critical, the light visible even from the convoy's rear cameras. "They won't take anything from us," one tech said quietly. No one argued. The core systems prepare. While the rim collapsed inward, the core turned itself into a fortress. The lunar shipyard switched to full military production, laying keels for heavy cruisers alongside the skeletons of new dreadnoughts. On the icy plains of Europa, Silent Guard 1 took shape, a ring station bristling with railguns, missile batteries, and deep space tracking arrays. From the outside, it was nothing more than a darkened shell. Only those who walked its armored corridors knew the barrels could fire in perfect synchronization, overlapping into a wall of steel and plasma. Mars became the staging ground for rapid response wings, squadrons of stealth interceptors and corvettes whose hulls drank light instead of reflecting it. The price of leaving. In the inner sanctum of the United Earth Assembly, Director Vor faced the map of the colonies. Systems winked out one by one, replaced by neutral gray. She thought of the people she'd met during her inspections. A farmer in Ria's Ark who had given her bread from the first harvest, a dock worker on Harrow who'd refused to let her carry her own bags. Each of them was somewhere in the black now, following convoys like lifeboats between stars. Some wouldn't make it. Outside the chamber, protesters gathered, not against the retreat, but against the silence. They wanted vengeance, answers, names. The assembly gave them none. The last-run convoy Delta 12 was the final group to cross back into core space. The UNS Resolute, Hale's ship, brought them in. It had been a long, tense run from the frontier. They'd lost 2 freighters to sudden strikes and almost lost the hospital ship to a mine net. As the fleet passed the perimeter beacon marking the outer defense line, Hale watched the relief ripple through the crews in the open comm channels. Laughter, weeping, shouts of home. But his own gaze stayed fixed on the dark beyond the beacon. The hunters were still out there, and sooner or later, they'd come knocking on the walls humanity was building. When the last convoy docked at Luna, the gates closed. Trade routes to non-core systems were severed. The galaxy had ignored humanity's cries. Now humanity would return the silence and prepare for the day it would be broken. Fortress Earth. The gates to the Sol system closed with the quiet efficiency of a well-planned ambush. No announcement, no fireworks. Just a sudden tightening of patrol grids and the final, clipped acknowledgement from traffic control. Non-core travel suspended. Authorization revoked for all outbound civilian traffic. From that moment, the Sol system was no longer an open crossroads of commerce. It was a vault, and every day that followed was spent making sure nothing could break it open. The new border. It began with the Silent Guard, a tri-layered defense network stretching from the asteroid belt to the Kuiper fringe. Silent Guard 1 circled Europa's orbit, its matte black hull blending with the void. Beneath its armor, a spiderweb of railgun barrels lay dormant until the order came, capable of firing solid tungsten slugs at 14 kilometers per second. Silent Guard 2 was stationed in the outer belt, hidden in the shadow of Ceres. It was a missile fortress, stocked with enough nuclear and kinetic payloads to gut a fleet. Its targeting AI had a simple doctrine: nothing leaves alive. Silent Guard 3 floated far out in the Kuiper, half buried in a hollowed-out planetoid. Its purpose was simple: see them coming. Its telescopes could track a drive flare at 30 light hours, its quantum comms snapping the alert back to Earth before an enemy even knew they'd been spotted. The orbital ring Earth itself was crowned with something new, an orbital ring, 200,000 kilometers of interconnected platforms, habitats, and launch bays. Officially, it was called the Terran Defense Ring, but to the crews that worked it, it was the Halo. Civilian eyes saw habitat modules and solar collectors. What they didn't see were the concealed weapon ports hidden between the trusses, the launch cradles for interceptor drones, or the pulse beam turrets slaved to a battle AI running in deep, cold data cores on Luna. At any given time, at least 1/4 of the halo's length was dark, running without external lights or emissions, the better to fool enemy recon. Mars, the Forge. Mars became the beating heart of military production. Its skies filled with the silver scaffolds of orbital shipyards, cradling the hulls of half-finished cruisers and carriers. Surface cities ran 26-hour shifts, hammering out the armor plates, reactor cores, and weapon mounts that would feed those scaffolds. The Martian Defense Council authorized black docket projects, designs the Coalition had outlawed centuries ago. These included mass driver arrays, planet-to-orbit guns firing depleted uranium rods with enough force to punch through a dreadnought's reactor core, eclipse mines, stealth drones that mimicked small asteroids until they detonated in blinding EMP bursts, Spectre suits, personal exo-armor that blended active camouflage with short-burst micro-jump capability, perfect for boarding actions. The doctrine of absolute deterrence. The United Earth Fleet adopted a new playbook. It was short, brutal, uncompromising. 1. Strike first if the threat is confirmed. 2. Leave no enemy asset operational. 3. If you cannot hold, you deny. In war rooms deep beneath Geneva, simulations ran day and night. The scenarios were no longer defensive. Now they were preemptive, aimed at crippling any fleet that so much as drifted too close to the core. Admiral Rakesh Dutta summed it up to a gathering of captains. Our enemies must believe that to touch Earth is to sign their own death warrant. Ghost fleets. Somewhere in the shipyards, far from public eyes, old civilian freighters were given new lives. Their cargo holds became missile bays, their container stacks housing drone racks and stealth comm arrays. These ghost fleets were scattered to deep patrol routes in the Oort cloud, their transponders silent, their drives cold until the alarm was sounded. Their crews lived in silence for months at a time, eating freeze-dried meals in ships where even a dropped wrench was a security risk. They were the tripwire, no medals, no broadcasts, just the knowledge that if the enemy came, they'd be the first to shoot and the first to die. Life inside the fortress. For the average citizen, life tightened, travel permits became scarce. The easy flow of exotic imports slowed to a trickle. Every port, station, and shipyard bristled with inspections, security drones drifting like watchful sharks. But there was also a change in tone, less bickering between Earth's political blocs, more shared purpose. The words "never again" appeared painted on docking bays, etched into the hulls of ships, printed on ration boxes. Children in Luna schools learned evacuation drills alongside their math lessons. The enemy watches beyond the walls of Seoul. Someone was watching. Long-range probes caught faint signs, drive flashes that never came closer, encrypted signals bouncing between dead worlds, the shimmer of cloaked hulls at the edges of sensor range. The hunters hadn't gone away. They were patient, studying. But for the first time, humanity wasn't just waiting to be attacked. They were preparing to be the ones who struck first. By the end of the first year of isolation, the Sol system no longer looked like the open, eager hub it once had. It looked like the mouth of a cannon, and somewhere deep in the vaults beneath the halo, engineers were already drafting the weapons that would fire it. The new doctrine. The doctrine of absolute deterrence wasn't printed on glossy paper or projected in the assembly chamber for the public to applaud. It was a file marked "Eyes Only," and it began with a single sentence. No hostile force shall leave a human engagement zone alive. The war games begin. The first test of the new doctrine took place in the Black Gulf between Neptune and the Kuiper Fringe. The UNS Resolute was one of 20 ships chosen for Operation Irontide, a war game designed to simulate the kind of full-spectrum assault the hunters might bring to Sol's doorstep. Instead of friendly cruisers acting as the enemy, the exercise used retired coalition warships purchased years earlier for research. They were gutted of their original AI and refitted with stripped-down battle computers. These ships would fight hard, with no handicap, and unlike in coalition war games, any damage they took was real. The simulated attack began with a deep jump insertion of 6 hostile cruisers, each escorted by drone frigates. In the old days, Earth's fleet would have formed a defensive wall, holding the line until reinforcements arrived. Now, under the new doctrine, They did something very different. Vector for intercept. Break into kill wings, Hale ordered from the Resolute's command chair. 3 wings detached, each pairing a destroyer with a corvette. They swung wide, vanishing into the dark, while the main battle group kept its lights and shields bright to draw the enemy in. At precisely 43 seconds into contact range, the flanking wings lit their drives, surging out of the shadows at full burn. The kill was clinical. The destroyers ripped the drone screen apart with linked particle lances, while the corvettes cut into the cruisers' blind arcs with missile spreads designed to overload their defensive grids. The exercise's enemy ships never had a chance to regroup. From first shot to final kill, the battle lasted 4 minutes and 29 seconds. Under the old doctrine, that would have been considered impossible. The Assembly watches back in the secure hollow chamber beneath Geneva. The United Earth Assembly watched the battle play out in real-time feeds from every ship. Director Shirin Vor spoke first. 4 minutes to total destruction. Minimal friendly losses. This is the difference between waiting to be struck and ensuring the strike never lands. Some members nodded, others looked troubled. The speed, the ruthlessness, it was the kind of thing that would make the coalition label humanity dangerous. Vor knew that. She didn't care. Drills without warning. In the months following Iron Tide, live-fire drills became a constant rhythm. Civilian populations were evacuated from moons and stations without notice. Then the fleet would stage surprise assaults on their own defenses, forcing every crew to be ready without warning. The Halo's weapons crews learned to rotate shifts without gaps, every gun manned at all times. Silent guard stations practiced launching full salvos in under 15 seconds from cold standby. On Mars, shipyard crews competed to beat their own repair records, refitting a battle-damaged cruiser in days instead of weeks. The political edge. When word of the new doctrine leaked, because nothing that decisive stayed secret forever, the coalition's reaction was swift. An encrypted message from the Council of Stability reached Earth's diplomats. Your posture invites escalation. Deterrence can become provocation. The galaxy is not prepared for this level of aggression from a species so new to the stars. Earth's reply was shorter. We were not prepared to watch our colonies die. Prepare for us. The hunters take note. Whether through spies or intercepted comms, the enemy learned of the doctrine. Signs of their presence along the outer perimeter became less frequent, their probes more cautious. No direct engagement occurred, but fleet intelligence reported that the hunter signature clusters were spreading further apart, as if the enemy were avoiding the new kill zones entirely. It was working, at least for now. The doctrine's hidden clause. What the public didn't know, what even most fleet captains didn't see, was the doctrine's Clause 9. If a hostile entity's origin is confirmed, the United Earth Fleet reserves the right to carry out total infrastructure denial within that entity's home system. In plain terms, not just the fleet, not just the bases, everything. It was this clause that made even the hardline admirals hesitate when they read it. But after New Horizons, Selene 5, and all the others, no one erased it. The next step wouldn't be a drill. It would be the first test of Clause 9, and it was closer than anyone wanted to admit. Ghost fleets. They didn't look like warships. That was the point. From a distance, the Horizon's Grace was just another bulk freighter, her hull weathered with decades of simulated micrometeorite scarring, her transponder broadcasting a legitimate cargo registry from the days before the retreat. Even her wake signature had been tuned to mimic the lazy, uneven output of a ship with a half-worn drive core. But inside her cargo holds, there were no crates of grain or ore. There were 48 vertical missile cells disguised as shipping containers, and a crew that had been handpicked not for their rank, but for their willingness to vanish into deep space without contact for months at a time. Life in the dark. Captain Elias Rourke's voice carried low and steady as he briefed his people in the dim glow of the wardroom. Remember, we are not a hammer. We are a knife. We don't announce ourselves, we don't linger, and we don't get caught. The Grace is a ghost. That means if someone sees us before we choose, we've already failed. The crew didn't nod or cheer. Ghost Fleet crews didn't waste gestures on ceremony. Every one of them understood the rules. No open broadcasts, no navigation lights, no unnecessary power draws. Even the heating systems were cycled irregularly to keep the ship's thermal signature unpredictable. Meals were rationed and repetitive, vac-packed nutrient bars and reheated protein gel. The engineers joked they'd start naming the flavors after the moons of Jupiter, if only to feel like the monotony had a map. The first mission. The Grace's first assignment took her 40 light hours beyond the Kuiper fringe into a corridor fleet intelligence had flagged as a probable staging ground for Hunter reconnaissance craft. They coasted cold for 2 weeks, letting the enemy come to them. It was hard, empty work, sitting in the dark while the sensors whispered their quiet stream of readings. Crew members drifted into a rhythm of silent patrols, diagnostic checks, and short, clipped conversations over low-power intercoms. On the 15th day, they found their target. It appeared on the passive sensors as a faint reflection, something breaking the light from a background star, then vanishing again. The shape was wrong for an asteroid, too sharp-edged, too precise in its movement. "Hunter Scout," murmured Rourke. "They're mapping us." The Grace's hull seemed to hold its breath as the crew activated their strike sequence. The container doors in Hold 2 split open, revealing a missile bay that hadn't seen light since leaving Mars. At Rourke's order, 3 Eclipse missiles slid free, their engines cold. They coasted toward the scout ship like drifting debris, their stealth skins absorbing stray light. When the proximity triggers went hot, the void flashed white, EMP bursts slamming into the Hunter's systems. For half a heartbeat, the alien craft's cloaking field buckled, revealing a sleek, needle-like hull with skin that shimmered like liquid glass. Then the Grace's second wave of missiles tore through it, leaving nothing but drifting shards and frozen gas. No celebration. There was no victory broadcast, no war cry. The crew sealed the missile bay, purged all emissions, and resumed their cold drift. Ghost fleets didn't advertise their kills. Their only measure of success was that the enemy never knew where the blow had come from, or if another was coming. Still, in the privacy of Engineering Bay 3, one of the junior techs etched a small line into the bulkhead near the coolant pipes. It wasn't an official tally. It was just a reminder. The others. The Horizon's Grace was only one of 18 Ghost Fleet ships deployed in the first wave. Others carried different loads. The Wintermare, loaded with stealth drones that could mimic the drive signatures of entire fleets to lure enemy hunters into traps. The Iron Chime, fitted with long-range kinetic cannons that could fire from so far out, the shots arrived before sensors registered the launch. The Lark's End, a former passenger liner, turned into a deep space boarding platform for Spectre suit commandos. Each operated alone, without support, and often without knowledge of the other's missions. The message in the shadows. Over the next 6 months, reports trickled back to Fleet Command, not through open channels, but through encrypted bursts bounced off cold mirrors and relayed by couriers. The Ghost Fleets had erased 37 Hunter craft, disrupted at least 4 suspected staging operations, and left no trace that could tie the kills to Saul. Admiral Dutta read the compiled reports in the war room and allowed himself a rare smile. "They'll start wondering if their ships are breaking down," he said quietly. "That's how we want it. Not fear, doubt. But the Hunters adapt." In the 7th month, a Ghost Fleet ship didn't come home. The Shadow Mare went dark after reporting possible contact near the Farvale Nebula. No debris was found, no distress signal recorded. Fleet analysts speculated the Hunters were beginning to suspect the invisible war being waged against them. The Ghost Fleet captains received a new standing order: assume the enemy is hunting the Hunter. Back in the dockyards of Mars, fresh freighters were already being gutted, their civilian skins ready to hide new teeth. The Ghost Fleets would continue to grow, because when the next war came, the opening blow would come from ships no one ever saw coming. Weapons of the Black Vault. The Black Vault wasn't a building. It was a network of facilities buried so deep in rock and ice that no orbital scan could find them, strung across Mars, Luna, and the Belt. Each one was sealed behind blast doors 3 meters thick, with airlocks big enough to swallow an armored dropship. Inside, the air hummed with the sound of machines forging things no coalition treaty would ever allow. The Mandate, When the order came down to begin Black Vault operations, it carried no qualifiers, no cautionary phrases. The directive was stamped in red and signed by the United Earth Assembly itself. Build what must be built. Use what must be used. There will be no limitations. That clarity of purpose changed everything. Scientists and engineers who once danced around political oversight now worked with unshackled speed. Prototypes that would have languished for decades in safety reviews rolled off assembly lines in months. The Arsenal mass driver arrays. On the dark side of Luna, a trench 2 kilometers long housed the first operational mass driver batteries. Each could hurl a 10-ton tungsten slug at near relativistic speeds, capable of piercing a battleship's reactor core before its shields could react. Firing one was like swinging a sledgehammer at a gnat. There would be nothing left to recover. Singularity charges. Developed in a lab beneath Olympus Mons, these were contained micro-black holes designed to last just long enough to devour a target before evaporating. They were small enough to fit in a missile warhead, large enough to collapse a cruiser's entire midsection into nothingness. Eclipse Mine's stealth drones designed to look and drift like space debris. When triggered, they detonated in an electromagnetic burst that could blind every sensor and fry every circuit within 100 kilometers, the perfect opening for a kill strike. Spectre suits, exo-armor woven with adaptive camouflage fibers and fitted with micro-jump capability for short, instantaneous leaps through space. Boarding teams could appear inside an enemy hangar without crossing the hull, testing in the shadows. Every weapon in the vault was tested, and testing meant destruction. An abandoned moon in the outer belt became a firing range. Mass driver shots slammed through its crust, carving new craters into its face. Spectre-suited Marines boarded derelict freighters, neutralizing automated defense drones in seconds. Eclipse Mines turned a captured Varrock corvette into a drifting, powerless hulk before it could transmit a single word. There was no debate over these results. Every officer who saw them simply signed off and marked the systems for immediate deployment. The Vault's Guardian's entry into the Black Vault facilities was restricted to cleared for war-end assets personnel. Those who worked there understood what they were building wasn't just advanced technology. It was the future survival of humanity. The engineers joked grimly that they were writing the second half of the doctrine of absolute deterrence, the part no one would speak aloud in public. We will never be prey again. Integration with the fleet. Within a year, Black Vault weapons began appearing quietly aboard frontline ships and Ghost Fleet freighters. The UNS Resolute received an Eclipse Mine deployment rack hidden behind retractable hull plates. The Horizon's Grace was upgraded with a small Singularity charge launcher. Only 2 warheads, but enough to turn the tide of an ambush. Mass driver platforms were stationed on hidden orbital tracks around the silent guard stations, synced to fire in coordinated salvos that could annihilate an enemy fleet before it crossed the halfway mark to Sol. The enemy doesn't know. So far, none of the hunters had faced a Black Vault weapon in open combat. That was by design. Fleet Command wanted the first use to be decisive, overwhelming, a moment burned into the memory of every enemy commander in the galaxy. The Black Vault existed for one reason: to make sure that when the day came, the enemy wouldn't just lose the battle. They'd lose the will to ever face humanity again. The drill? The order hit the fleet at 4:30 Sol Standard with no preamble. Alert condition red, fleet-wide simulation, OPOR inbound, and there had been no warning briefings, no prep time. That was the point. The drill was designed to feel like the first minutes of a real war, chaotic, fast, and merciless. The Scenario Fleet Command's war planners crafted the simulation as a nightmare scenario. 3 enemy task forces entering Sol from different vectors. Saboteur teams already inside the Halo, tasked with disabling key defense nodes. Civilian convoys in mid-transit between Luna and Mars, unescorted. The rule was simple: if you failed, the system fell. The opening shock. On the UNS Resolute, Captain Hale's display lit up with red icons blooming across the system map. The simulated enemy wasn't some harmless stand-in. It was a composite of every hunter tactic fleet intelligence had recorded, from stealth flanking runs to minefield corral traps. Silent Guard 2 reporting simulated mine saturation in the outer belt, came the first urgent burst over comms, requesting counterfire authorization. Granted, Hale answered, even as his Exo's fingers danced across the hollow controls to bring Eclipse mines online. Seconds later, the Resolute's mine rack opened, releasing a dozen stealth drones that drifted toward the incoming wave. On Hale's tactical feed, their icons winked out as they went cold, invisible until they detonated. The Halo under siege. In the orbital ring above Earth, alarms screamed through the residential sectors. Halo Security Team Bravo responded first, their Spectre-suited Marines emerging from hidden compartments and vanishing into micro-jumps that carried them across the structure in bursts of blue light. In the simulation, saboteur drones had already compromised 2 of the Halo's defense turrets. The Marines found them clinging to the superstructure, multi-limbed machines tearing into conduits with bladed tools. One Marine triggered her suit's overcharge, momentarily visible in a shimmer of light as she tore through the nearest drone with an armored gauntlet, sending fragments tumbling into the void. Mass drivers speak. The Luna mass driver arrays, hidden beneath kilometers of regolith, came online in perfect unison. At Fleet Command's signal, every barrel fired, the recoil shuddering through the moon's surface. From high orbit, the effect was terrifying. Silver streaks lanced through the black, each shot slamming into simulated enemy hulls with pinpoint accuracy. The battle AI marked hits in crimson. Within seconds, an entire enemy cruiser group winked out on the board. Civilian convoy run. Halfway between Mars and Luna, a real civilian convoy was pulled into the exercise without notice. The simulated enemy flagged them as high-value targets. Hale detached the Resolute from the main fleet and burned hard to intercept. He cut active sensors, relying on the ship's passive arrays to stalk the attackers. When the moment came, he triggered the Singularity Launcher, one of the Black Vault's quiet gifts. A micro-black hole bloomed in the simulated enemy's path, tearing their formation apart in seconds. The convoy's pilots didn't even realize what had happened until the threat icons vanished from their scopes. The kill net. By the drill's 3rd hour, the enemy was hemmed in. Silent guard stations, Halo turrets, Ghost Fleet freighters, and capital ships all linked into the kill net, a synchronized firing protocol that turned the system's defenses into a single coordinated weapon. Every second, another simulated hostile icon blinked out. By the 4th hour, there were none left. Aftermath. Fleet Command's post-drill assessment was blunt. Fleet survival rate 92%, civilian survival rate 100%, enemy elimination time 4 hours, 12 minutes. The verdict from Admiral Dutta was even blunter. We can hold the core. Now make it so we can take theirs. The drill ended without applause. The crews returned to their routines. The Halo's lights dimmed back to normal, and in the Black Vault, technicians began running data from the simulation into the next round of weapons refinement. Because everyone knew, someday, the red icons wouldn't be pretend. In the shadows, the walls of Sol were strong now, strong enough that even the most aggressive enemy commander would think twice before crossing them. But walls alone didn't win wars. If humanity was ever going to break the cycle of waiting for the next attack, they needed to know exactly who the hunters were. Not guesses, not speculation, and where they were coming from. That meant slipping past the line and into the dark, where every kilometer was enemy ground. The Ghost Recon Directive Fleet Command called it Operation Veil Piercer. Its mission was simple on paper: identify the origin of hunter operations, map their fleet movements, supply lines, and staging zones, return without being seen. Only 3 ships were chosen: the UNS Blacklight, a stealth corvette wrapped in light-absorbing metamaterial; the Horizon's Grace, freshly refitted from her Ghost Fleet patrols; the Winter Mare, a deception craft capable of faking an entire battle group's sensor signature. Each ship carried a crew trained to operate without support for months, relying on dead drops, cold mirrors, and encrypted tight beam bursts to pass information home. Crossing the line, the Blacklight went first, skimming the fringe of the Kuiper and riding a slingshot trajectory off Pluto's shadow to mask her drive flare. The ship ran dark the moment she cleared the perimeter. No comms, no beacons, only the faint hum of her stealth drives. Her captain, Lieutenant Commander Alara Vance, stood on the bridge in the quiet blue glow of passive sensors. Every blip was studied, catalogued, and tagged. Most were harmless. rogue asteroids, drifting debris, the faint signature of a derelict probe from before the retreat. But then came the first contact. Hunter staging ground. It appeared on sensors as a cluster of gravitational anomalies, arranged too neatly to be natural. Vance magnified the image. Slowly, outlines emerged. Half a dozen alien carriers anchored around a jagged planetoid, their hulls black and faceted like cut obsidian. Between them floated a lattice of smaller ships, moving in precise patterns, while automated drones ferried cargo from hidden dock bays to the carriers' holds. The Hunter base was far larger than Fleet Intelligence had estimated, and it was close enough to strike Sol in a matter of weeks. The Lurkers Pass, Vance ordered a slow drift through the system's outer edge, the Blacklight's hull skin adjusting to mimic the local starlight. The crew spoke only in hand signals, every unnecessary sound avoided. They recorded everything: the pattern of carrier deployments, the refueling schedules, the defensive drone perimeters. At one point, a patrol cutter swept so close that its running lights reflected faintly off the Blacklight's hull. The crew held their breath until it passed. Other threads. The Horizon's Grace, operating a sector away, intercepted a Hunter convoy, not to engage, but to shadow. For 6 days, Rourke's crew followed the enemy ships through uncharted systems, watching as they rendezvoused with supply haulers from yet another unknown origin point. The Winter Mare played a different game. It projected the sensor profile of a massive human fleet deep in hostile space, drawing Hunter patrols away from real recon craft. Every time the enemy moved to investigate, they found only empty space. The prize, on the Blacklight's 12th day beyond the line, her sensors caught something unexpected: an encrypted transmission bouncing between Hunter ships and a signal node in Coalition territory. Vance didn't need orders to know what that meant. Someone inside the Coalition was feeding the Hunters. She ordered a full recording sweep and tucked the data into a sealed burst package for the next courier drop. The return, slipping back across the perimeter, was harder than leaving. The Hunters were alert now, their patrol patterns tighter, their search nets wide. But the recon crews knew their trade. Each ship returned to Sol weeks apart, quiet as shadows, carrying enough intelligence to redraw Fleet Command's war maps. The Hunter staging grounds were now marked in red, their supply lines were charted, and the treachery inside the Coalition, that was a new problem entirely. The walls of Sol still stood, but now humanity had a map of the enemy's door, and the next step was deciding how and when to kick it in. The Quiet War. It didn't begin with a declaration. It didn't even begin with a public order. The Quiet War started in locked war rooms beneath Geneva, in the secure decks of the Martian shipyards, and in encrypted messages sent only to captains whose crews had already proven they could disappear. Fleet Command's directive was short: disrupt their lines, erase their reach, leave no trace that we were there. The goal wasn't to destroy the Hunters outright, not yet. It was to hollow them out from the inside, one strike at a time, until the day humanity was ready to take everything. First strike, the refueling grid. The UNS Blacklight was sent back beyond the line, this time with teeth. Her target, a Hunter refueling node hidden in the rings of a gas giant. The station was a spindly lattice of docking arms and storage tanks, bristling with defensive drones. In the old days, this would have been a fleet action. Now, it was the work of a single ship. The Blacklight drifted close under the thermal mask of the planet's rings, releasing a pod of eclipse mines disguised as rock fragments. The mines floated silently toward the station until their triggers lit green on Vance's console. The detonations came in perfect sequence. First the sensor arrays, then the comm relays, then the drone bays. By the time the station's defense AI realized what was happening, the Blacklight was already angling away, firing a final spread of kinetic penetrators into the fuel tanks. There was no transmission, no recorded attackers. To the Hunters, it would look like a freak accident, until it happened again somewhere else. Ghost Fleet Gambit. In another sector, the Horizon's Grace intercepted a Hunter convoy carrying raw materials to a shipyard. Rourke didn't attack the convoy itself. Instead, his crew shadowed it for 4 days, mapping its exact route and sending the data to the Winter Mare. The Winter Mare jumped in ahead of the convoy's arrival, seeding the route with disguised singularity charges hidden among asteroid fields. When the convoy entered the belt, each asteroid came alive in a flash of warped light, tearing the freighters open from bow to stern. Rourke, still cloaked in the grace, picked off the survivors and erased the beacons. No hunter ship ever made it home. Sabotage in the shipyard's Operation Veilpiercer's recon had revealed the location of one of the hunters' secondary shipyards, a sprawling framework built into the skeleton of a hollow moon. The Ironkime, a Ghost Fleet kinetic platform, took up position just outside the system's sensor envelope. Over the course of 36 hours, her crew used mass driver cannons to lob inert projectiles at the yard's structural weak points. The shots were spaced far enough apart to seem random, an occasional meteor strike, but each impact severed a critical joint, or destroyed a pressure-sealed bay, or knocked a half-assembled warship from its moorings. By the end of the second day, the entire structure collapsed into the moon's gravity well. The hunters would find the wreckage, but they'd never trace the shots. The Coalition problem. The most delicate operation wasn't against the hunters at all. It was against the node in Coalition territory that had been caught sending encrypted traffic to hunter ships. Officially, Earth couldn't touch it without risking open war with the Coalition. Unofficially, Fleet Command assigned it to the Spectre Corps. 2 stealth frigates inserted a 12 Marine team in Spectre suits directly into the station's cargo intake bay. They moved like shadows through the maintenance decks, planting a quantum burn charge in the comm relay core. When the Marines exfiltrated, the charge erased the relay so thoroughly that no one could prove there had ever been one there. The station's governor would call it a freak cascade failure. Fleet Command would call it one less traitor feeding the enemy. Ripples in the dark. Within 6 months, hunter movements began to change. Convoys doubled their escorts. Patrol patterns grew erratic. There were more pauses in their raids, more caution in their advances. They didn't know who was bleeding them, but they knew something was. Admiral Duda called the results exactly the right amount of fear. "They're looking over their shoulders now," he told the assembly. "That means when we finally move in daylight, they'll already be halfway to panic." The Quiet War left no headlines, no parades, no official tallies. But for the crews who fought it, every erased shipyard, every vanished convoy, every silent comm node was another step toward the day when the war wouldn't be quiet at all. The test, the hunters came back, not as a full invasion fleet, not yet. This was a probe, a way to measure the walls humanity had built since the retreat. But for the first time in years, they were bold enough to cross into human-claimed space, and they picked the wrong day to try. Contact at the edge. Silent Guard 3, the Kuiper station, was the first to see them. 3 hunter cruisers, each shaped like a spearhead, flanked by a dozen smaller escort craft, slipped into the outer system at an oblique vector. Their drive signatures were sharper than before, their formations tighter, a sign they'd been learning from the Quiet War. Lieutenant Yara Quinn, commander of the station's sensor grid, tagged them in red and sent the alert into the kill net. Within seconds, the signal reached every ship and station in Sol. Admiral Dutta's call. In the deep command room beneath Geneva, the lights shifted to combat amber. Admiral Rakesh Dutta leaned over the holotable, the hunter formation projected in midair before him. "They want to see what we can do," he said. "Fine, show them." He didn't issue a measured response or send out a token defense force. The doctrine was clear: no hostile leaves alive. The trap springs from concealed orbits in the outer belt, a squadron of Ghost Fleet freighters powered up their hidden racks. Eclipse mines drifted into the hunter's path, masked by cold gas vents that mimicked comet trails. The hunters reacted faster than expected, their escorts sweeping ahead to detonate the first mines before they could close. But that was the point. The mines were bait. As the escort spread out, the UNS Valiant and UNS Resolute dropped from stealth, their drives flaring hard. Coordinated railgun fire punched through the escort's shields in the opening salvo, breaking their screen in half. Silent Guard's answer. From nearly 600 million kilometers away, the Luna mass drivers opened up. Tungsten rods screamed across the void, guided by the killnet's predictive targeting algorithms. The first struck a hunter cruiser amidships, snapping its spine. The second hit drove through an escort and kept going, venting it into nothingness. By the time the third volley came, the remaining hunter ships were twisting hard to escape the firing envelope, which only drove them straight toward the halo. The halo's teeth from Earth orbit, the halo lit up like a crown of fire. Concealed pulse beam turrets cycled through their arcs, overlapping fields of fire to track the fleeing hunters. When the first beam lanced out, it sliced an escort clean in half. The second beam burned through the shields of a cruiser, leaving it glowing red before a missile spread from Mars-based launchers finished the job. Clause 9 in action. The last cruiser tried to break away. Dutta authorized a Black Vault solution. From the Resolute's hidden bays, a singularity charge launched. No faster than a torpedo, but impossible to stop once armed. It bloomed in the cruiser's path like a dark star, and in seconds the ship collapsed inward, folding into itself before vanishing in a flash of evaporating radiation. There was no wreckage, no survivors. Aftermath. The entire engagement lasted 12 minutes from first contact to final kill. For the hunters, the message was undeniable. The Sol system was not only defended, it was lethal. In the debrief, Admiral Dutta didn't smile. This was only a probe, he reminded his officers. They'll come in force next time, and we'll be ready for that too. The Steel Veil. The shipyards over Mars had been busy for years, but some projects were hidden so deep in the docket that even seasoned fleet captains didn't know they existed. One of them was Project Steel Veil. Its unveiling came with no press release, no public debut, only a quiet summons to the Geneva War Room for a select handful of admirals and ship captains cleared for Black Tier access. When the holotable lit, the room went silent. A predator in the dark. The Steel Veil was unlike any ship humanity had ever built. 2 kilometers long from prow to stern, its hull was a seamless curve of matte black metamaterial. No external ridges, no heat vents visible to scanners. Every weapon mount, every launch tube was recessed beneath retractable plates that could snap shut and leave nothing but smooth armor. Its design combined the stealth profile of a Ghost Fleet freighter with the firepower of a dreadnought. Primary armament: 8 long-range mass driver turrets, each capable of launching guided tungsten penetrators across entire planetary orbits. Secondary systems: pulse beam arrays, missile batteries, and singularity charge launchers. Special systems: a chameleon field, a layered cloak that could mimic enemy sensor returns, making the ship appear as anything from a small freighter to an asteroid field. The ship didn't need an escort. The ship was the escort. Purpose: the Steel Veil wasn't built to defend Sol. That job was already handled by the Halo, the Silent Guard, and the Kill Net. This ship was built to go into enemy space undetected and dismantle their infrastructure. Shipyards, fuel depots, command hubs before the first formal shot of war was ever fired. If humanity had learned anything from the retreat, it was this: the best defense was to hit first, hardest, and leave nothing to hit back. Trial by fire Admiral Dutta didn't waste the first Steel Veil on a shakedown cruise. The UNS Nightsword's maiden voyage would be a live operation. Her target, a Hunter forward operating base identified during Operation Veilpiercer, a station the size of a small moon, coordinating raids across 3 sectors. The Nightsword emerged from FTL at the system's edge, coasting dark toward the base. Her chameleon field made her look like a drifting ore hauler on enemy scans. At 30,000 kilometers, her weapons bays opened. The first salvo of mass driver rounds struck the station's comm arrays before alarms could sound. The second volley gutted its drone hangars. Then the singularity charges went in, collapsing entire sections of the station into glowing debris. The whole strike took 9 minutes. The Night Sword was already vanishing into the black before the first Hunter response ships arrived. Fleet integration. 3 more Steel Veils rolled out of the Martian shipyards over the next 18 months. UNS Shadowlance, UNS Eclipse Fang, UNS Void Harrow. Each was assigned to a different vector beyond Sol, paired with Ghost Fleet reconnaissance to pick targets and coordinate precision strikes. The doctrine was simple: spread them far, hit without warning, and never let the enemy know how many existed. Effect on the Hunters. Within 6 months of the first Steel Veil deployment, Hunter staging operations in 2 sectors went dark. Their convoys rerouted along slower, less efficient paths. Some of their outer bases were abandoned without a fight, likely because the enemy feared they'd already been marked for destruction. And still, no hunter had ever laid eyes on a steel veil and lived to report it. When Admiral Dutta addressed the assembly after the Night Sword's return, he kept his words short. We no longer wait for them to come to us. Now they wait to see if we're coming for them. The Council's unease. The Galactic Coalition's Grand Hall had stood for over 5,000 years. Its vaulted crystal ceilings had witnessed the rise and fall of empires, the signing of peace accords, and the slow, careful balancing of power between its member species. But the session called on this day was different. The screens on the chamber's curved walls were filled with a single emblem, the crest of the United Earth Fleet, accompanied by images and reports no one in the Council could ignore. The reports. In the last 3 months, human ships had appeared in half a dozen sectors far from Sol, not as invaders, but as defenders. On the agrarian world of Varan, human Steel Veil warships had intercepted a hunter raiding force before the local militia could even scramble. In under 10 minutes, the attackers were reduced to drifting debris. On the Coalition border station Tassara Prime, human Spectre Corps Marines had boarded in full view of its security forces to neutralize saboteurs, and then left without asking for payment or recognition. In the gas-harvesting fields of Auric, a human Ghost Fleet freighter had quietly eliminated a hunter convoy targeting civilian tankers, then departed before the survivors even knew who had saved them. Every witness account told the same story. Humans arrived without warning, struck with overwhelming force, and left as quickly as they came. Debate in the Hall Council speaker Arak Thun of the Varan Elders gestured with 4-jointed hands, his voice echoing across the chamber. These actions, though commendable in isolation, are destabilizing the balance we have maintained for millennia. Earth operates beyond our laws, without our sanction. From the opposite dais, Ambassador Shirin Vor, Earth's representative, rose slowly. Your balance was built on watching predators tear at the weak while you debated procedure, she said, voice cold. We do not share that philosophy. If a people are in danger, we will act, coalition member or not. A ripple of murmurs spread through the chamber. Councillor Tathir of the Kalari shifted his translucent fins in agitation. And what happens when your interventions provoke a war none of us are ready for? Vor's gaze hardened. Then we will fight it, and we will win it. The quiet fear. In private sessions after the debate, coalition intelligence briefers admitted the truth no one wanted to say aloud in public. Humanity's military reach now rivaled that of the largest member powers. Their fleets were faster to mobilize, their weapons were more adaptable, and perhaps most alarming, their campaigns were not for conquest, but for protection. That made them unpredictable, dangerous in a way the Council wasn't used to. A rescue that crossed a line. 2 weeks later, the UNS Night Sword intercepted a distress signal from Xylar, a coalition mining colony deep in neutral space. The attackers were not hunters this time. They were a rival coalition member, attempting to seize the mines under the cover of border enforcement. Under coalition law, Earth should have referred the matter to the Assembly for arbitration. Instead, the Night Sword jumped in, deployed 2 wings of Spectre-suited Marines, and drove the attackers off within the hour. When the Xylari leadership offered payment, Captain Vance refused. Your people were under attack. That's all the reason we needed. The message spread's word traveled fast, faster than any council edict could suppress. Merchants spoke of human ships appearing in the nick of time. Refugees whispered about rescue convoys escorted by silent black-hulled warships. Even worlds that once viewed humans as dangerous now sent discreet envoys, hoping to gain their protection. And the hunters were losing ground, not because of any coalition campaign, but because humanity's shadow war had begun pushing them back in every sector they touched. The Council's dilemma. In the High Assembly's secure chamber, Council Speaker Arak Thun summed it up in a single sentence. They are doing what we should have done centuries ago, and they are doing it better than we could now. Some saw that as a reason to finally invite Earth into the coalition. Others saw it as a reason to consider them the next great threat. Earth didn't wait for the decision. They had already decided what they were, a shield for anyone who needed it. Coalition approval was optional. The bait. The plan was simple on paper and dangerous in practice. Put a convoy just far enough outside the Sol perimeter to tempt the hunters, let them think they'd found an easy kill, then close the jaws before they knew they were inside a trap. Fleet Command called it Operation False Dawn. Setting the stage. The convoy was real, a dozen freighters, 2 tugs, and a medical transport. Their cargo was valuable enough to draw attention. Refined titanium plates and reactor cores bound for Mars. What the hunters wouldn't know was that every freighter was armed. Beneath false hull panels sat concealed missile pods, point defense turrets, and the newest generation of Black Vault railguns scaled for merchant hulls. In the shadow of the asteroid cluster known as Cinder's Crown, 3 Steel Veil warships waited: UNS Nightsword, UNS Shadowlance, UNS Eclipse Fang. Their drives were cold, their hulls dark, their profiles masked to read like drifting rocks on any scan. The bite. The hunters came on the 3rd day, 2 cruisers and 6 escorts, approaching from opposite flanks. From the convoy's bridge feeds, their shapes were like blades cutting through starlight. No hails, no demands for surrender. They accelerated straight into attack vectors. Captain Rourke, commanding the disguised freighter Horizon's Grace, kept his voice calm over the convoy channel. Maintain formation. Shields to 20%, make it look good. Springing the trap. At the moment the hunters crossed into optimal range, Rourke keyed his mic once. The response was immediate. The asteroid shadows shifted as 3 massive shapes emerged. The Steel Veil ships powering up in unison, their hulls shedding the cloaking shimmer like a predator stepping out of tall grass. The Nightsword fired first. A spread of singularity charges that blossomed into black suns amid the hunter formation. One escort vanished instantly, another spun out of control, venting plasma before it broke apart. The Shadowlance's mass drivers came next, each shot slamming into a cruiser's midsection with enough force to rupture armor like paper. The killnet in motion. As the hunters scrambled to react, the killnet linked every ship in the trap. Targeting data flowed between the convoy's hidden guns and the steel veils, each salvo perfectly timed to hit from multiple angles. Missiles screamed out from what had been unarmed freighters. Railgun slugs tore through escort shields, while pulse beams from the Eclipse Fang burned deep into a cruiser's reactor compartment. The hunters never even had a chance to return effective fire. In the war room beneath Geneva, the holomap filled the chamber. Red icons clustered around a single system in hunter space, Verac Prime. "This," said Admiral Dutta, his voice like gravel, "is their spearhead. Everything they've built for the last decade is sitting here. If they launch, they'll throw more ships at us than we've ever seen in one place." Fleet Intelligence Director Kiyoshi Tan tapped the map. Over 300 combat hulls. We count 8 carriers, 50 destroyer screens, and enough supply ships to sustain a siege for months. If they make the jump, we won't just be holding the wall, we'll be trying to rebuild it while they're already inside. Dutta looked around the table. So we don't let them launch. Operation Iron Dagger. The plan was the boldest humanity had attempted since the retreat. Strike the Verac Prime fleet assembly before it departs. Destroy or disable as many capital ships as possible. Force the survivors to scatter instead of regrouping. 3 Steel Veils would lead the attack: Nightsword, Shadowlance, and Eclipse Fang. They'd be supported by Ghost Fleet freighters carrying Eclipse mines, singularity charges, and deep-range missile racks. Spectre Corps Marines would target fleet tenders and command ships for boarding and demolition. The approach: the fleet translated into hunter space under full cloak, dispersing into 3 prongs to encircle Verac Prime. From orbit, the planet was a sprawl of shipyards, dry docks, and orbital gantries, all glittering in the light of a swollen blue sun. Around it, the hunter fleet floated in perfect formation, rows of black, angular hulls that looked like a forest of knives. "They're lined up for inspection," Rourke muttered from the Horizon's Grace. "Shame to waste such a neat parade." The opening blow. The Nightsword fired first, unleashing a full spread of mass driver rounds into the nearest carrier group. The slugs punched clean through hull plating, venting entire hangar bays into the void. Seconds later, the Shadowlance seeded the formation with singularity charges, each one blooming into a dark sphere that swallowed escorts whole before winking out in a burst of radiation. The Eclipse Fang targeted the supply ships, firing precision missiles tipped with black vault penetrators that ripped through fuel tanks and reactor housings in violent, silent flares. Spectre Strike. While the main fleet hammered from range, Spectre Corps shuttles leapt from cloak directly onto the hulls of fleet tenders and command ships. The Marines cut through airlocks, cleared corridors in minutes, and planted demolition charges at key structural nodes. In one strike, a tender carrying replacement reactor cores erupted in a chain reaction that tore 3 dock destroyers apart. The break. The hunters scrambled to respond, but the coordination that made their fleet so dangerous evaporated under the onslaught. Without their command ships and supply lines, formations broke apart into defensive clusters. That was exactly what the kill net was designed for. The human fleet shifted targeting priorities in real time, encircling and annihilating each cluster before moving to the next. Withdrawal under fire. Duda's standing orders were clear. Hit them hard, hit them fast, and get out before they could rally. After 42 minutes of continuous engagement, the signal went out. Iron Dagger complete. Break contact. The Steel Veils and Ghost Fleet ships pulled back under cloak, vanishing into the deep before the hunters could mount a pursuit. The damage done by Fleet Intelligence's estimates, over half the Hunter capital fleet was destroyed at Verac Prime. Shipyard capacity was crippled. Supply reserves were gone. The enemy could still fight, but the knife they'd been preparing for Saul had been shattered before it ever left the sheath. Dutta stood at the war room map, watching the red icons of Hunter survivors scatter. "This buys us time," he said, "enough to decide whether we wait for them to come again or finish this on our terms." Silent, no more. The Verac Prime strike had shattered the Hunters' momentum. Their fleets were scattered, their supply lines in ruins, their shipyards crippled. But Admiral Dutta knew a wounded predator was often more dangerous than a healthy one, and he wasn't about to give them the chance to recover. The time for shadow wars and selective strikes was over. The time had come to finish it. The plan. In the war room aboard the Night Sword, the holomap displayed 3 vast arcs of Hunter territory. Every known stronghold, shipyard, and staging ground was marked in red. Operation Final Light, Duda began, is not about taking ground. It's about making sure there's no ground left for them to stand on. When we're done, there won't be a fleet, a dock, or a base left to threaten anyone. The campaign would be launched on every front at once. Steel Veils would spearhead deep strikes into the heart of Hunter space. Ghost fleets would sow eclipse mines and singularity charges across retreat corridors and supply lanes. Spectre Corps would board and destroy any remaining command vessels and defense hubs. Silent guard stations for the first time would fire beyond Saul's borders, their mass drivers striking at enemy worlds to ensure nothing could be rebuilt. The launch began with darkness. Every fleet translated into Hunter space under cloak, moving in complete radio silence. The first targets were communications arrays. Once those were gone, the Hunters couldn't coordinate, couldn't call for reinforcements, couldn't even warn each other where the humans were. The second targets were shipyards. From the hidden bays of Ghost Fleet freighters, singularity charges tore through docked hulls, while Spectre Marines planted demolition packs along dry dock superstructures. By the time the first Hunter patrols realized they were under attack, half their infrastructure was already gone. The killing ground. In the Garos Rift, a Hunter attempt to rally their remaining capital ships ran headlong into a human ambush. 3 Steel Veils, backed by 2 full destroyer squadrons, emerged from cloak inside the formation's outer screen. The kill net lit the void with overlapping fire, mass driver rounds splitting destroyers in 2, pulse beams carving deep scars into carrier hulls. Eclipse mines frying escorts so completely their lights went out in the middle of maneuver. When it was over, nothing but drifting slag remained. No sanctuary. For decades, Hunter doctrine had relied on dead zones, regions too dangerous for sustained fleet operations where they could hide until the threat passed. Not anymore. Human fleets hunted them into these dark refuges, deploying drones and stealth craft to flush them out before striking from multiple vectors. It didn't matter where they ran, human warships were already there, waiting. the last broadcast. As the final stronghold burned, a single transmission went out across every open channel in Hunter space, translated into their language and every coalition dialect. Your war ends here. You will not rebuild. You will not return. Humanity stands watch, and we do not sleep. The words weren't shouted. They didn't need to be. Aftermath. When the campaign ended, the Hunters were gone as a power. Survivors fled into deep, uncharted space in small groups, stripped of the ability to mount organized war. Human fleets withdrew from Hunter territory, leaving behind only wreckage and warning beacons. Enter here, and you will not return. In the months that followed, the galaxy shifted. Worlds once abandoned by the Coalition now openly flew human fleet colors. Trade routes stabilized under human patrols. Even the Coalition Assembly, grudgingly and with more than a little fear, passed a resolution formally recognizing Earth as a guarantor of security in known space. The closing words. From the balcony of the Halo's central command spire, Admiral Dutta addressed the fleet and every citizen in the Sol system. We were told we were not ready for the stars. We were told to wait, to prove ourselves, to survive long enough to be worthy. We have survived, we have fought, and now we have done more. We have made the stars safer for all who live under them. We are silent no longer, and we will never be prey again. The cheers that followed rolled through the Halo's corridors and into the void beyond, carried on channels across human space. The war was over, but the watch had only just begun. Clause 9 in full view, one cruiser broke away, burning hard for open space. Dutta's standing orders were clear: no hostile leaves alive. The Night Sword's forward bay opened, launching its final singularity charge. The dark sphere expanded in the fleeing cruiser's path, swallowing its bow before the rest folded into it. The sphere winked out, leaving only drifting particles. There would be nothing for the Hunters to salvage, not even wreckage to study. Aftermath. In less than 9 minutes, the engagement was over. The convoy's shields barely showed scorch marks. No human ship had taken a hit. From the horizon's grace, Rourke recorded a short message for Fleet Command. The bait worked. Send more hooks. The message sent. The operation wasn't just about killing Hunters. It was about making sure word spread. The trap had been set far enough from Sol's core to ensure the Hunters' reconnaissance would record the defeat in detail. Fleet intelligence analysts estimated that within a month, every Hunter commander in 3 sectors would hear about the slaughter at Cinder's Crown. And when they did, they'd have to ask themselves the question humanity wanted burned into their minds. Was that convoy bait? First contact in war. The Coalition hadn't sent a fleet to Sol in nearly a decade. Not since the days when humanity had been dismissed as unready and ignored while their colonies burned. But that changed when reports of the Cinder's Crown trap reached the assembly floor. To the Coalition's old guard, it wasn't a victory. It was a threat. Arrival at the Wall 12 Coalition warships translated into real space just outside the Silent Guard perimeter. Sleek, high-polished hulls in ceremonial colors, drives burning steady instead of cold and masked. They came openly, broadcasting their identification codes and a formal request for parley. Admiral Rakesh Dutta watched them from the Halo's command gallery, hands clasped behind his back. They came to warn us, he said, and to see if they should fear us. The inspection demand at the Geneva Assembly Chamber, the Coalition delegation's leader, Councillor Tethir of the Kalari, wasted no time. Your forces now operate far beyond your borders, Tethir said, his translucent fins twitching with each word. You have engaged in military action against hostile and member states alike without authorization. We require immediate inspection of your fleets and facilities to ensure compliance with interstellar law. Ambassador Shirin Vor didn't flinch. No, she said flatly. We don't operate under your authorization. We operate under necessity. Tethir's voice rose. Necessity does not excuse destabilization. Vor leaned forward. Tell that to the worlds we've saved while you were still debating procedure. A demonstration. Rather than argue, Dutta offered a controlled tour of the Halo and Silent Guard 2. The Coalition agreed, expecting to find an overextended fleet and hastily cobbled defenses. Instead, they were walked through corridors lined with disciplined crews and equipment in perfect readiness. They saw the mass driver controls, each weapon's firing solution calculated in seconds by AI and slaved to the kill net. They watched live drills in which civilian convoys were rescued in minutes, complete with singularity charge strikes and steel veil intercept maneuvers. The coalition officers exchanged quiet, uneasy glances. This wasn't just a wall, it was a loaded gun. The breaking point midway through the tour, a real alert cut in. A hunter strike group had entered the outer belt. Duda didn't clear the room. He looked straight at Tethir and the other dignitaries. "Stay," he said. "Watch." Within minutes, Ghost Fleet pickets had identified the hunter's exact vector. The kill net linked every available platform, and Silent Guard 2's mass drivers opened fire. The coalition delegation stood on the observation deck as the engagement unfolded in real time. Hunters annihilated at extreme range, escorts flanked and burned down by Steel Veil warships arriving out of stealth. The entire fight lasted 11 minutes. No human losses. No hunter survivors. After the smoke Tether spoke first, his tone subdued. "You could destabilize the entire sector." Vor answered without hesitation. "We could also hold it together. The difference is in who's willing to act." Unspoken realization. When the coalition fleet departed, no formal agreements had been signed, no new sanctions imposed. But every delegate who left Sol carried the same unspoken conclusion. Humanity could not be controlled, and if they chose to protect someone, nothing in the galaxy could stop them from doing it. The forge burns hot from orbit. Mars looked like it was on fire, not from war, but from the glow of shipyard scaffolds and reactor stacks burning day and night, their light bleeding into the thin atmosphere like molten rivers. The hunter's probe at the Silent Guard had made one thing clear. The real assault was coming, and when it did, humanity intended to meet it with overwhelming force. Shipyards without sleep. The Martian shipyards had already been working at triple capacity since the Steel Veil rollout, but now Fleet Command removed the last remaining bottlenecks. Civilian fabrication lines were commandeered. Mining haulers in the belt were diverted to carry bulk materials. Orbital cranes swung constantly, laying keels for destroyers and frigates while massive slipways birthed the next Steel Veil hulls. Every dockside engineer knew the schedule wasn't months anymore. It was weeks. There were no night shifts, just rotating crews keeping the forges burning without pause. Weapons by the thousands, Black Vault weapon production surged alongside ship construction. Eclipse mines were stamped out in such numbers that container loads were hidden in every deep patrol ship and outpost. Mass driver rods were manufactured from solid tungsten cobalt composites, each one precision balanced to keep its trajectory within a fraction of a meter over millions of kilometers. Singularity charges were still the most complex to build, but assembly lines in Luna's buried bunkers doubled their output. Each warhead triple-checked by crews who understood there was no room for error. The Spectre Corps Expands Spectre suit production hit a new milestone, and for the first time, entire Marine battalions were equipped with them. Training grounds carved into the canyons of Valles Marineris hosted full-scale boarding simulations, complete with live-fire drills against automated drone defenders. Marine instructors drilled into recruits a simple truth. We're the last thing they'll see before they die. Make sure it's quick, and make sure it's clean. The Outer Works Mars wasn't the only forge. Shipyards in the belt, hidden under camouflaged regolith, built smaller, faster craft for deep insertion missions. On Europa, the Silent Guard Station's fabrication arms worked to assemble modular weapons platforms, systems that could be detached, towed into position by tugs, and turned into instant kill zones anywhere in the outer system. Even Titan's methane refineries were repurposed into fuel production hubs for the fleet's stealth corvettes and jump-capable gunships. A different kind of recruitment. The fleet needed more than engineers and marines. It needed crews who could vanish into hostile space for months at a time, men and women comfortable operating without support, without backup, and often without orders. The call went out quietly, through channels trusted by veterans and deep space haulers. Those who answered weren't motivated by pay or glory. They were motivated by the same fire that had burned since New Horizon, the understanding that no one else was coming to save humanity but humanity itself. Duda's address. When Admiral Dutta spoke to the assembly from the Mars command spire, he didn't bring notes. His voice carried over secure channels to every dock, every bunker, every training ground. When they come, they will expect us to fight for our home. They will not expect that we have built a weapon of war out of our home. Every ship, every mine, every round you build is part of the wall that will break them. And when that wall holds, we will not simply survive, we will decide what happens next. The forges kept burning, the shipyards kept birthing warships, and in the cold between the stars, the hunters were already gathering for the strike they thought would end humanity. They had no idea what waited for them on the other side of Sol's Wall. The first offensive. The hunters were gathering. Recon reports from Ghost Fleet patrols painted the same picture again and again. Staging grounds swelling with ships, supply lines running hot, forward operating bases bristling with new construction. The main strike wasn't just coming. It was close. Admiral Dutta refused to let them choose the battlefield, the decision. The War Council met in the secure command deck beneath the Halo's primary defense hub. Steel Veil captains, Ghost Fleet commanders, Spectre Corps leaders, and Black Vault directors gathered around a table lit by a hollow map of hunter-controlled space. Dutta's opening words were simple. We've been reactive long enough. They won't expect us to hit them first, especially not everywhere at once. That's exactly why we will. The plan, codenamed Operation Breakpoint, called for 3 simultaneous deep strikes into Hunter territory, each designed to cripple a different aspect of their war machine. Fuel and logistics hubs, the arteries feeding their fleets. Shipyard complexes, the heart of their production. Command and coordination centers, the brain directing the assault. Strike 1, cutting the arteries. The UNS Night Sword, accompanied by a Ghost Fleet screen, translated into real space less than 30,000 kilometers from a Hunter fuel depot hidden in the corona of a small red dwarf. The depot's shielding was calibrated for solar radiation, not singularity charges. The Night Sword's launch bays opened, and 3 charges bloomed into black spheres inside the station's core tanks. The entire depot folded in on itself, vaporizing in a flash that lit the red dwarf's surface like a second sun. Strike 2, breaking the forge. On the far side of Hunter space, the UNS Shadowlance led a Spectre Corps boarding action against a sprawling shipyard complex embedded in an asteroid cluster. The Spectre Marines jumped directly from the Shadowlance's bays into the shipyard's pressurized corridors, tearing through automated defenses in minutes. Charges were set at every fabrication node and slipway. When the Marines jumped back to their ship, the explosions rippled through the asteroid like thunder under stone. What hadn't been destroyed outright was rendered useless by collapsed tunnels and twisted dock arms. Strike 3, decapitating the brain. The UNS Eclipse Fang and Horizon's Grace hunted a mobile command carrier coordinating Hunter raids in 4 sectors. Rourke, commanding the Grace, played the part of bait again, broadcasting a faint distress signal to lure the carrier into pursuit. When the carrier closed, the Eclipse Fang decloaked behind it and fired a mass driver salvo into its command spire, followed by an Eclipse mine detonation that fried every control circuit on board. With the carrier dead in space, the Grace launched precision railgun fire to finish the job, tearing the Hulk apart piece by piece until the reactor went critical. Coordinated withdrawal. All 3 strikes were timed to exit Hunter space within the same 12-hour window, using overlapping stealth corridors mapped during Operation Veilpiercer. The Hunters scrambled to respond but found nothing but wreckage and fading drive traces. The result? By the time the offensive was over, Hunter fuel reserves in 3 sectors were cut in half. Ship production dropped by an estimated 40%. Fleet coordination in the border sectors collapsed for weeks. For the first time, the Hunters weren't pushing forward. They were pulling back to protect what was left. When the War Council reconvened, Dutta didn't allow for celebration. "This is the start," he said. "We've drawn blood. Now they know we can reach them. Next time we don't just hit them hard. We don't let them get back up." Messages in the void. The strikes of Operation Breakpoint had left the Hunters reeling, but Admiral Dutta knew the shock wouldn't last forever. The next step wasn't just to weaken them, it was to change the political map of the galaxy. That meant sending a message, not through diplomats or negotiations, but in a language every power understood, action backed by the threat of overwhelming force. The broadcast sprang. The message went out over tight beam to known coalition members, neutral powers, independent stations, and even worlds barely capable of spaceflight. It was short, it was clear. To all powers and peoples, if you are under attack, we will answer your call. If you prey upon the weak, we will find you. If you ally yourself with the hunters, you will fall with them. We ask for no tribute, we offer no treaties, we give protection freely and vengeance without mercy. Fleet intelligence ensured the hunters intercepted it too. That part was intentional. Immediate reactions. In the far reaches of the coalition, small member states reacted first. The Avaran freeholds, long abandoned by the coalition after repeated raids, sent an encrypted packet to Earth with their patrol routes and requests for joint operations. The Polari mining syndicates, neutral until now, offered full access to their fuel depots if Earth would guarantee their safety. Even more surprising were the quiet feelers from larger coalition powers, worlds that would never admit publicly they needed help, but who suddenly welcomed joint exercises with human forces. The warning in action. The UNS Shadowlance made the first example. A small coalition border state, Creel, had been covertly selling censored data on merchant routes to the hunters. The Creel government thought they were untouchable, protected by coalition bureaucracy. When the Shadowlance arrived in orbit, it didn't announce itself. Its mass drivers destroyed every Creel military installation within an hour. The hunters never got another data packet. Quiet conversations in Geneva, Ambassador Shirin Vor met privately with representatives from nervous coalition worlds. One spoke bluntly, "You've made yourselves judge, jury, and executioner. If you keep this up, the Council will have no choice but to declare you an outlaw state." Vor's answer was colder than steel. Then the Council will have to decide how many worlds it wants to lose protecting the people who deserve it least. The hunters respond. 2 weeks later, hunter forces attempted a retaliation strike against a refugee convoy under human escort. They didn't know the Night Sword was shadowing the convoy. The hunters were gone in 6 minutes. Their wreckage left as a beacon for anyone who might try again. A single transmission was sent from the site, repeating on every open channel, "You were warned." A new alignment. The galaxy's neutral powers began quietly shifting. Worlds too small to stand alone now sent their merchant convoys along routes protected by human patrols. Independent stations began flying human fleet colors as a deterrent. Every time a human warship appeared on a long-range scan, it meant safety for some and death for others, exactly as intended. This wasn't just war anymore. It was the beginning of a new order, and humanity was the one drawing its borders. The knife at the throat. It began as a whisper in the encrypted traffic streams of hunter command relays, fragments of coordinates, fleet movement orders, and logistic schedules. At first, fleet intelligence analysts thought it was routine redeployment. Then the pieces came together. The hunters weren't just repositioning forces, they were assembling them, and the staging point was close enough that once the fleet launched, Saul would be inside strike range within a week.